The window cleaner in Bangkok. Bangkok is a city that never really sleeps. Anyone who's been there knows that. The traffic hums even at midnight. Food stalls keep sizzling by the roadside, and neon signs bleed into the dark sky. But once you get high above the noise, up in one of the luxury apartment towers that scrape the clouds, the chaos below fades. Up there, past the 30th or 40th floor, it's just you, the hum of your air conditioner, and the city lights blinking in the distance. That's what makes the silence so striking. A man named Ken had been living in one of those high-rise apartments in Sukhumvit. He was used to the life, elevators that never seemed to stop, uniformed guards at the lobby, a view that stretched across the Chao Phraya River if the haze wasn't too heavy. His unit was on the 38th floor, with a small balcony and wide glass windows that made the city look like a map of moving lights. It was around 2 a.m. when he first heard it. A soft, swishing sound. At first, he thought it was his neighbor dragging a chair across the floor, or maybe water dripping from an AC unit. But the sound was too close. Right against the glass, like the steady rhythm of a mop being dragged across a wet surface. The problem was, nobody cleaned windows at that hour. Not at that height. Window washers in Bangkok usually worked in the morning, when the sun was already up, harnessed in groups with ropes and buckets swinging down the side of the tower. Ken had seen them dozens of times before. At night, impossible. Still, the sound persisted. He got up from his bed and crossed to the window. The curtains were pulled shut, but the mop-like scraping continued. Hesitant, he reached for the fabric and pulled it back just a few inches. That's when he saw it. A figure clinging upside down to the glass. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't a shadow. It was a person, or something shaped like one, pressed flat against the window pane, its body hanging in defiance of gravity. Bare feet stuck to the glass. Long arms stretched downward, palms splayed, leaving faint streaks. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and even in the dim light, Ken could see the eyes. They weren't closed. They were wide, unblinking, staring straight into the room. Straight into him. He froze. His first instinct was to step back, but the figure moved with him, as if mocking the distance he tried to create. When he shifted left, its head twitched left. When he leaned closer to confirm it was real, it pressed its face harder against the glass, flattening its features until they looked more like a mask than skin. And then came the worst part. Its lips moved, not speaking, not forming words, just peeling back into a smile that had no warmth at all. Ken yanked the curtain shut. He staggered back, heart racing, trying to convince himself it was a dream, a hallucination from exhaustion. He didn't dare open the curtain again that night. The next morning, everything looked normal. The windows were clear, the balcony untouched. For a moment, he laughed at himself, shaking off the fear as just paranoia. But when he stepped outside to his small balcony to catch some air, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. A pair of shoes. Men's sneakers, worn but neatly placed side by side, sat against the balcony railing. He didn't own them. He had never seen them before. He asked his neighbors if anyone had been on his balcony. They shook their heads. Security told him no one had entered his floor that night, but he knew what he had heard. And worse, he knew what he had seen pressed against his window. Later, he found out he wasn't the only one. Tenants whispered about others who had vanished from their high-rise apartments, their units left locked from the inside, their balconies empty except for shoes. Some said it was the ghost of a construction worker who'd fallen while the tower was being built. Others believed it was something older, something that clung to the city before the towers rose, now using the glass as a stage. The detail that never changed was the shoes, always a pair left behind, as if the person had stepped right out of them, into thin air. If you ever find yourself in a high-rise in Bangkok, late at night, and you hear the sound of a mop against your window, don't look. don't pull the curtains back. Because if you lock eyes with whatever's hanging there, it might smile at you. And if it smiles, you won't be there to see the sunrise. All that anyone will find is your shoes, sitting neatly on the balcony. The red cloths of Chiang Mai. Northern Thailand is beautiful in a way that's hard to explain until you've been there. The city of Chiang Mai sits in a valley surrounded by mountains, with winding roads that cut through forests, rice terraces, and mist that hangs low in the mornings. Those mountain roads are breathtaking in the day, green stretching out forever, the air filled with the smell of earth and rain. But at night, when the fog rolls in, and the only light is from your headlights bouncing off the guardrails, they can feel endless. That's where the story begins. There's a particular mountain road outside of Chiang Mai that locals whisper about. Tourists don't usually hear it. It's the kind of thing shared between drivers, motorbike riders, and people who've lived in the hills their whole lives. Along the sharpest curves of that road, the metal guardrails are tied with strips of red cloth. Dozens of them. Some look new, some faded and frayed by the weather. They hang like little flags, fluttering in the mountain wind. At first glance, you'd think it was some kind of local ritual. An offering, maybe, or a roadside tradition. And in a way, that's true. They're warnings. A traveler named Mark was driving that road late one evening. He wasn't Thai, just a foreigner renting a small car to explore the countryside. He noticed the red cloths as his headlights caught them, swaying gently against the steel rails. Curious and maybe a little careless, he pulled over. Stepping out, the mountain air hit him, cool and damp. Crickets buzzed from the trees. He walked up to the rail, reached out, and tugged at one of the cloths. It came loose easily, the knot slipping away. He stood there holding it for a moment, trying to guess what it meant. He thought maybe it was just decoration, or part of some festival. He tossed it into the passenger seat and kept driving. That's when it started. Barely a few minutes later, as he rounded another curve, something appeared on his windshield. A handprint, dark red, smeared across the glass, as if someone had pressed a bloody palm right onto the glass from the outside. The fingers were spread wide, the marks dripping slightly before vanishing. Mark slammed the brakes, his heart hammering. He got out, circled the car, checked everything. The windshield was spotless. No handprint. Nothing at all. But when he climbed back inside, he could still smell it. That sharp, metallic tang. Unmistakable. Blood. He tried to laugh it off, telling himself it was exhaustion or some trick of the light, but he didn't stop to put the cloth back. He just pressed on, headlights cutting into the fog, the car engine growling as the road twisted higher into the hills. Then, around the next bend, he saw it. Another car. At first, he thought it was an accident. The vehicle lay on its side, crumpled against the ditch beside the road. Its headlights flickered weakly, one still glowing through shattered glass. But as he drew closer, he realized his blood turned to ice. The license plate. It was identical to his. Every number, every letter. It was his car, wrecked, mangled, lying dead at the side of the road. Yet here he was, still driving. He slammed his foot on the gas, speeding past, refusing to look inside the wreck. He couldn't bear to see who or what was sitting behind that wheel. The road seemed endless after that, the fog swallowing the mountains. The red cloth he'd taken still lying on the passenger seat, like it was mocking him. When he finally made it to his hotel back in Chiang Mai, he pulled into the parking lot, shaking so hard he could barely lock the door. The red cloth was gone. The next morning, he asked around about the red strips on the mountain rails. An old woman selling food at a roadside stand told him plainly, "They are tied where someone died. Every cloth keeps them there. If you take one, they will follow. Locals believe the mountain roads remember every life lost on their curves. The red cloths are not just memorials, they're anchors. They keep the restless where they fell. Anyone who disturbs them invites those spirits into their journey. And if you don't return what you took, you'll see the end meant for you. So if you're ever driving the mountain roads around Chiang Mai and see strips of red cloth tied to the rails, don't touch them. Don't even think about it. They're not there for decoration. They're there to hold back the shadows. And once the shadows get free, they don't give you a second chance. The voices of the floating market. If you've ever been to Thailand, you've probably heard about the floating markets. They're one of those things every guidebook talks about. Canals crowded with long wooden boats, vendors calling out, piles of fruit stacked high, sizzling pans with fried snacks, souvenirs balanced on the edge of the deck. During the day, it's chaos in the best way. Bright colors, loud voices, the smell of grilled food mixing with incense. But at night, once the tourists are gone and the sun has dropped, those canals turn into something else. There's a story about one of those floating markets outside Bangkok. By the time the shops close, the water is still, reflecting the dim lights from the stalls. The boats are tied up, their engines quiet, their awnings pulled down. You'd think the place would feel peaceful, but locals will tell you, you don't linger there after dark. A man named Tom, a traveler from abroad, didn't know that. He had visited during the day and loved it. The noise, the bargaining, the sense of stepping into another world. That night, unable to sleep, he decided to walk near the canals. He wanted to see the place when it was quiet, to take photos without the crowds. At first, it was exactly what he expected. Silent, eerie even, with the smell of river water rising in the humidity. The stalls along the banks stood empty, their bright umbrellas folded down. The water reflected the dim glow of lanterns hanging from wooden beams. Then he heard it. A voice. Cheap. Cheap. Over here. He froze, his camera hanging loose at his side. The words were in Thai, but he recognized the rhythm. He'd heard vendors call the same thing all day long, beckoning customers, waving fruit or trinkets. The only problem was, there wasn't a soul around. Every stall was shut, every boat tied down. The voice came again, clearer this time, echoing across the water. Here. Come here. He stepped closer to the edge of the canal, squinting into the darkness. That's when he saw it. A small wooden boat, drifting slowly toward him. No one was inside. At first he thought maybe it had come loose, just floating with the current. But the water was dead calm. No wind, no waves. And the way the boat moved, direct, steady, felt intentional. He waited, heart thumping, until it bumped gently against the dock. Its bow nudged forward like an invitation. The voice whispered again, "Come." Without thinking too hard about it, Tom stepped down into the boat. His weight rocked it slightly, but it held steady. He sat, camera still in his hands, staring at the empty planks in front of him. The boat began to move. It glided away from the dock, sliding into the mist that had gathered over the canal. Tom turned to look back, but the lights of the market faded fast, swallowed by the fog. Ahead, he could barely see more than a few feet, just the water rippling softly. The voice came again, closer this time, though no one was there. Cheap, fresh. Come look. It circled around him, like someone moving just beyond sight, calling from stall to stall. He gripped the side of the boat, his breath shallow. The mist thickened, curling around his shoulders, until he could see nothing at all. No market, no water, no sky. Just white, endless, and heavy. And then, silence. The next morning, when the market reopened, people found a boat floating near the bank. It was the same small vessel Tom had stepped into, but it was overturned, half submerged. There was no sign of him, just his camera, waterlogged, wedged against the wood. Locals shook their heads when they heard. They weren't surprised. They say the canals remember. For every vendor who drowned when their boat capsized, for every customer who fell into the water and never came up, their voices stayed behind, calling for company. That's why the red-eyed boatmen warn visitors never to wander after dark, never to listen when the stalls are silent. Because if you do, the water will call you in. So if you ever visit a floating market in Thailand, take in the colors, the sounds, the life during the day. Bargain for fruit, take photos, enjoy it all. But when night falls and the voices call out across the still water, don't answer. Because the only thing waiting in that boat is the mist. And the mist doesn't give you back. The bus stop at EKKAMAI. Bangkok is a city that feels alive at every hour of the day. Street vendors keep selling noodles long after midnight. Motorbikes zip through the traffic no matter the time. And convenience stores glow like little beacons on every corner. But if you've ever had to take one of the long-distance buses, the kind that leave from the EKKAMAI terminal on Sukhumvit Road, you know the strange quiet that settles after the last bus of the night pulls away. By 2 a.m, the noise fades. The ticket booth shut down. The big overhead lamps hum faintly, attracting only moths. The benches, once crowded with travelers carrying backpacks and suitcases, stand mostly empty. That's when the place feels wrong. Not bustling, not busy, just hollow. That's where this story begins. A young office worker named Nat often found himself at EKKAMAI late at night. He lived outside the city, so sometimes when he missed the last train and couldn't afford a taxi, he'd head to the bus terminal, hoping to catch a ride. One night, just after the last bus had gone, he sat down at one of the long metal benches. The air was damp from an earlier rain, the concrete still slick. The smell of diesel hung in the air. At first, he thought he was alone, but as he adjusted his bag and leaned back, he felt the bench dip slightly beside him, like someone had just sat down. He glanced to his right. No one. The seat was empty. Still, the bench sagged as if holding weight. A faint shadow spread across the metal slats, darker than the night, damp, like a wet figure had pressed into it. Nat's throat went dry. He told himself it was nothing. Maybe the metal was uneven. Maybe condensation was pooling strangely. He tried not to look again. But before he could stand, a cold hand clamped down on his shoulder. He flinched hard, jerking forward. And then, right by his ear, a voice whispered in Thai, "Next time, together." The words were soft, almost gentle, but they hollowed him out inside. He spun around, but there was no one. Just the glistening empty bench, the wet shadow slowly fading, like it was soaking into the metal. Nat grabbed his bag and bolted, not even looking back at the ticket counters or the gates. The next morning when the cleaning staff came through, they noticed something unusual. Beneath that same bench, carved faintly into the underside of the metal, were names. Dozens of them. At first, they thought it was graffiti, the kind bored teenagers scratch into public places. But these weren't random words or love notes. They were names, written in neat Thai script, one after another, as if part of a list. Some of the staff recognized the names. People who had gone missing. Regulars who had once waited for buses and were never seen again. Every few months, more names appeared. Always written in pencil, faint but clear, as if someone sat crouched beneath the bench during the night, slowly adding to the record. Local drivers and guards know the story, though they don't talk about it much. They say the spirit at EKKAMAI is tied to the final bus, the last chance to leave the city before dawn. For those who miss it, something else comes instead, something that offers its own kind of passage. If you're unlucky, it will sit beside you. If you're foolish enough to meet its gaze, it will touch you. And if you're chosen, your name will be carved into the underside of that bench before morning. So if you ever find yourself waiting at the EKKAMAI bus terminal after the last bus is gone, take this advice. Don't sit on the benches. Don't listen if someone whispers to you. And whatever you do, don't check for your name under the seat. Because if it's there, it means your ticket has already been punched. The straw figures of ISAN. If you've ever been to ISAN, the northeastern part of Thailand, you'll know it's a place of wide fields, red dirt roads, and long, hot afternoons. Life there is slower than in Bangkok, tied to the rhythm of farming seasons. After the rice harvest, the fields are left bare, except for piles of straw and sometimes straw figures, roughly made scarecrows, tied together with old cloth, stuck in the ground to guard what little remains. In the daytime, they're almost comical. Crooked arms, floppy hats, faces drawn with charcoal. But at night, when the fields go dark and the wind blows across the stubble, they look different. They look alive. That's where the story comes from. A young man named Chai was driving back from a late visit with relatives in a nearby village. The road cut straight through the rice fields, flat and empty on either side. The moon was out, but it didn't give much light. Just enough to see the pale shapes of straw figures scattered through the harvested fields. At first, he didn't think much of them. He'd seen them all his life. Farmers made them from leftover stalks, tying them upright to scare off birds, or to mark the corners of a field. But as he slowed near a bend, something caught his eye. The figures seemed closer than before. Chai pulled over, switching off his engine. The night was silent except for insects buzzing. He stared into the field. The straw figures stood motionless, scattered across the land. Then he noticed something strange. Their shadows. The moon was dim, but even so, the shadows didn't look right. There were too many of them. A single figure should cast one long shadow in the pale light, but some had 2, 3, even 4. The dark shapes stretched across the stubble, reaching toward the road. His skin prickled. He told himself it was a trick of the light, a cloud drifting across the moon. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling he was being watched. He got out of the car, his sandals crunching on the gravel. The air smelled dry, with the faint sweetness of straw. He stepped closer to the nearest figure. Its head was a bundle of rice stalks tied in a knot, its arms just sticks sticking out from its torso. It was harmless. But when he looked up again, the rest of the field had changed. The straw figures had multiplied. Where there had been maybe a dozen, now there were dozens more. A ring of them closing in slowly, filling the gaps in the field until it looked crowded. Chai's chest tightened, his legs itched to run, but something in him froze. He told himself he was imagining things. He took another step forward, just to prove to himself that he wasn't afraid. That's when he saw it. One of the figures had his face, not just a vague resemblance. His face, unmistakable, woven into the straw. The shape of his eyes, his mouth, twisted into an expression he didn't recognize. The straw skin looked alive, almost wet, shifting as if it were breathing. The figure's head tilted slightly, just like his did when he stared too long into mirrors. Chai tried to step back, but his legs wouldn't move. His feet were planted hard into the ground, locked in place as though the soil had swallowed them. He clawed at his thighs, trying to break free, but nothing happened. The straw figures edged closer, their shadows stretching, bending across the dirt until they reached his ankles. The one with his face leaned forward, strands of straw rustling without wind. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The next morning, farmers found his car on the side of the road, door still open, keys still inside. In the field, there was no sign of him, only a mound of straw piled high in the dirt, where the wind carried away pieces slowly throughout the day. People in ISAN whisper about the straw figures. Some say their offerings gone wrong, meant to honor the spirits of the fields, but twisted by disrespect. Others believe they're a kind of mirror, reflecting the last person to see them, pulling them into the harvest so the land will never be empty. Either way, locals warn, if you see a straw figure at night, don't go near it. Don't count them, don't watch their shadows, and if one of them looks back at you with your own face, don't wait for morning, because by then, you'll just be part of the straw,